bold journalism,
But Drew Hernandez is a strong-minded individual.
exposing lawlessness,
Hernandez, who is ideological,
finding the truth,
and use the word Antifa.
This is what they do.
battling
They're
mainstream
liars. The woke mob, all they can do is lie.
These are the front lines.
What's going on, thought criminals? Welcome to Frontlines. I am your host, Drew Hernandez. We have a very special episode for you guys tonight. A lot to talk about, especially particularly the church and self-proclaimed Christians, and particularly Christian leaders and so-called pastors. Because we live in an age right now where there are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing, and it seems like the sheep like to protect the wolves. It could be a case of Stockholm Syndrome, but anytime some kind of fake pastor or a wolf actually gets exposed, it seems like they actually get protected. And at the same time, we have a bunch of beta males within the church that claim to be filled with the Spirit of God that are afraid to call anybody out. Not everyone that's a Christian, but it does seem that there are a lot of betas within the church that are unwilling to call out evil, unwilling to get controversial, unwilling to offend people for the sake of the gospel and truth. And I think we're in this place where you see a lot of people functioning like cowards because they're afraid of the consequence. They're afraid of getting canceled. They're afraid of maybe losing what they do have, maybe because they've built their church or their ministry based off of religious, Christian, trendy things that have kind of built this following on or off social media. Maybe pastors are afraid to lose their 501c3 status. I've seen a lot of that being a youth pastor in my years. Behind the scenes, seeing so-called senior pastors be cowards to stand up against tyranny, stand up against the homosexuals, stand up against those that are evil and vile, which we are called to as Christians to expose evil. And Christ made it very clear, you are the light of the world. We are called by God to function as lights in this dark planet that we occupy. We preach the gospel in mercy and in truth, just like Christ commanded us to. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we just let evil run rampant and destroy our society and sit back and say, well, Jesus said there'd be days like this. We're in the end times, so let's just pack it up and chill and sit back and just watch the sky. No, that's not Christianity. That's not biblical Christianity. That's cowardice is what that is. Well, I had a great in-depth conversation with the great TPUSA contributor, Victor Marks, about this very thing. And I want every single one of you guys to share this information, copy the links, Real America's Voice, Rumble, Getter Chat, what's up? Shout out to every single one of you. Copy the links right now and share it to some, beta self-proclaimed Christian that's always sympathizing with the homosexuals and afraid to call anybody out. Just send this to them and let's see how they react to it, because now is the time where we stand or we fall. And if God be for us, who could be against us? Enjoy. I'm here with the great Victor Marks. Victor, thank you for being on the show again.
Yeah,
on the
course,
front lines.
brother. I love that thought, criminals.
I love it, man. I mean, it's 1984, George Orwell. It's where we're at. It's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's quite literally appropriate with what's going on with the CCP.
Yeah.
And they're just destroying their people even more. What is your take when you see those videos coming out of China and they're just welding people in apartment buildings, zero COVID policy? It is satanic, quite literally satanic.
I've done some work in Burma, modern day Myanmar, and I would say this, it's shocking to me how humans can treat other humans in such a way that life doesn't matter. So when folks are watching them being welded in or a building catch on fire, trust me, people don't care. Those making decisions, they really don't care. And that's the hard part of life that I think Americans had better wake up to. Many Americans live in a sense of a bubble that anybody in positions of authority or leadership actually cares about us.
Yes.
Very few do. Very few do.
Yes, I totally agree with that, especially like the younger generation. Because I remember growing up, studying what happened like with the Jesus movement and like the 60s and 70s, even like the hippies, right?
Yeah.
Before that, total anti-government, didn't trust the man, like all those phrases, right? And then here we are, fast forward to 2022, and we've quickly become a society of young people that just think the government has the best interest in mind for them. As a Christian, I'm not 100% anti-government. I think God has established certain things, right? But big government that wants to control our lives, like the CCP, is problematic. But do you find it interesting that here we are in American culture where we have an entire generation, not everyone, that really believe the government just cares about them, like the AOCs, and you know what I mean? That's what we're seeing.
I actually have to start putting into play the intentional messaging that's gone into dumbing down and making the younger generation passive in their critical thinking. Our work and what we do with counter sex trafficking and counter pedophile work and training equipment, all that. And we still have a home in Iraq, a safe house, and I did counter messaging work against ISIS for years, and we still do counter messaging. So from a psych ops point of view, a person can stand back and go, this is just like textbook of how they're dumbing down, including, I remember my first red flag was when the cartoons started changing. And I went, wow, they're really, and then there was a thing called Adult Swim. And I would watch stuff that was so anti-God, anti-morals. Because, cartoons for us when I was a kid was Saturday morning. You get a bowl of cereal and you'd watch funny ones, or they'd have one or two in the afternoon. But we have fallen asleep, and I'll say my generation fell asleep to challenge and insert at least risk into those trying to get to the kids. So, on a number of levels, I have to think there's been some intentionality in the messaging. It's the proverbial frog in the water pot deal. Put a frog in there, let them swim around, and slowly turn the heat up. And to me, the other thing I'd add, Drew, is I have a biblical worldview that I believe, at any time, this could be the end days. Ultimately, evil is what's behind all of this. So it makes it more plausible for me, quite honestly.
From a biblical worldview, it makes sense. You mentioned counter pedophile work. So you see when you see messaging taking place in the media or the arts or music or whatever, so you have a different kind of lens.
Yes.
When you see these things, can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, let's talk about.
In terms of like the pedophilia,
sure.
It's everywhere. They're trying to normalize.
Okay, let's talk about the connectivity or the connection between the messaging of dumbing down just manhood, removing masculinity, decision making, facing your fears with courage to challenge something, enduring hardship. All these things, to the lowering of testosterone, which it's a certain fact. Things have been to make men less of men. And I believe ultimately it's not because they want to make all men gay or, trans or whatever. I think it's a much higher play, which is destroy the father in the family unit. Without a father in that best role, kids will not be best protected, and therefore it makes children vulnerable to pedophiles.
100%. Even from a biblical perspective, we have God the Father, and Jesus, when he was literally interacting with the Pharisees, he said, "You are of your father, the devil." So either have one or the other.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the Son of God viewed the devil as the father to not born again humans.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that we have governmental entities that are trying to remove God and replace it with anything and everything, especially themselves, with the pedophilia, with the child mutilization, with the grooming and everything taking place. At the end of the day, it is a antichrist, Luciferian, the spirit
completely
that is trying to prop itself up as Father.
Yeah.
Take away God the Father, you put in your father, the devil. And I think that, from my perspective, that's what I see in all of this. At the end of the day, from a spiritual level, biblical level, that's what I see in all of it.
Well, that's what will keep you sane. You know, outside of that, you'll go down rabbit holes and you just, but ultimately, if you pull back and go, what's the big play? And it's this demonic influence, war between good and evil. And the devil has always been after children. You think about Pharaoh, you know, killing the kids. And then think about Jesus, Herod, going after the children again, killing them. Satan, he hates children. And if he can get them abused, and I'll say this to your listeners and those watching, a child who suffers sexual abuse, that type of trauma, it warps everything in their life, from their identity to who is God if he wasn't here, for me, or sexuality, anger. It's the biggest plague the enemy has when you're talking about children. That's why we must take a hard stand, immovable, unquestionable, and protect children at all costs.
You know, we're entering into this place in America's story where we have government entities, we have so-called activists, you know,
Right.
social justice warriors that come out and they are pretty clear that, hey, you are a child abuser if you do not accept your child's identification or their pronouns, or if you don't want to mutilate their genitals because if they're a biological boy that identifies as a biological female and you don't mutilate their genitals, then you're a child abuser. We're going to call CPS on you and take your kid. That's happening in our country, Victor. Did you ever think that you would live long enough to see something like that?
Not a
taking
chance.
place?
And I'll tell you, one of the best intellectual responses to people like that is, you're stupid and shut up.
I want to talk about faith. You're not only a TPUSA contributor,
Yep.
you're a TPUSA faith contributor as well. Man of God. Victor Marks
Thank
is
you.
someone that I respect greatly, because you see a lot of guys on social media, so-called rock star pastors that claim to be men of God, but when they really do get held to the fire, they flee, right? But I've watched Victor for years, and this guy's been consistent with his message. He's been consistent with what he claims and lives it as well. None of us are perfect, but I think it's very, very important that we practice what we preach, and we're not cowards through it all. So why are we seeing a lot of cowardice? And that's one thing that the book of Revelation warned, that people will be thrown
Look
in
at you.
hell
Look
for being
at you,
cowards.
Drew. What are you doing pulling that one out?
We got to.
Oh, that one a lot of people don't cover. Look, we've spent a lot of time, people know the work that we do, rescuing, recovering women and children from ISIS. That's where we got best known as a ministry, engaging, recovering, setting captives free physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Now it's all over the world, here in the U.S. included, which is one of the hot spots. But I'll say this, the power's in the preaching, and we recognize that more than ever in the Islamic world. So, of course, the enemy, if he's not going to fight against the church, he'll just infiltrate it. And I'll give you a great example.
Okay.
Kids being abused in churches has been going on for years. Southern Baptist Convention just got busted, and it's just on and on and on and on, right, as abuses. So I simply said this, you guys, if you want a viable solution to help protect children, you can do background checks, but it does nothing if the person doesn't have a criminal background regarding sex abuse, right?
Yes.
So I said, before you let somebody work with kids or you hire a pastor, just do a simple polygraph exam, right? Not a big deal. And ask just 3 questions. Have you had sexual fantasies about children? Do you have any? You can set it up how you want. It's 86% accurate. We wouldn't still be using them in the intelligence community. And clearances, which I had to have when I was in the military. And guess what? The pushback that I get from pastors is mind-boggling.
What?
And it boiled down to this. As some guys say, there's so much dirt on some of these older pastors They don't want to risk them being put on a poly. And I'd say this, look, I'm not after your old sins and weirdness and struggles, whether it's private sin, whatever. But to protect children moving forward, that's a viable layer of redundancy to protect children.
Yeah.
And it shows you how unhealthy the church in America is. And those listening or watching, ask your pastor, would you be willing to institute, as part of the background check before hires people working with kids, just a simple poly? See what they say.
You know, it's interesting because how do you claim to serve a God and a master that said, if you cause one of these little ones to stumble that believe in me to sin, throw a millstone around his neck, throw him into the ocean, but then be afraid to expose pedophilia or expose or even really look into someone's background before serving in the church? That doesn't make any sense to me, other than there might be something there that they're trying to hide.
Right. Which, of course,
insanity.
Yeah, you'd want. And look, you know, I think most pastors, that don't want to do this, maybe they struggle with pornography or whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, okay, that's a different level. That's something different. You know, we offer a freedom from porn course on my website, victormarks.com. We want guys to be free from that. But to deal with kids, when you start messing with children, that's a different area. And I'd say this fear is big, the fear of being found out, the fear of causing or stepping outside of the norm. That's one of the reasons why I love Charlie, love and respect you. You're not normal. I see your work. No. I'm like, this dude, he is swinging for the stinking parking lot when you swing that bat. And then against moral issues, you're using the bat as a weapon, metaphorically speaking, people, to bring truth. And it matters. So you really do get to see courageous people. And, you know, because of what we do, I've got 16 times to Iraq or Syria. And I've brought Christians there. I've brought pastors, and I've seen real quick those who talk the talk, but facing a certain level of danger, nope. And that's one of the reasons why I respect you as a friend, colleague, fellow warrior, because you've gone into some hard places, and you'll continue to push because there's risk involved. But show me in the New Testament or the Old where it says, be safe. As a Christian, we're supposed to play it safe.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a lot of men's hearts that need to be set on fire with a mission for doing right and protecting kids. I don't know how it gets more pure than that.
Well, you know, Victor, when you take a look at the New Testament or even the Old Testament, and when persecution comes, it has this effect on the church. It does two things. It spreads the gospel, and it shows us who's real and who's not. Purification. And I think right now we're kind of we've been blessed in America.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen some dark places. Yep. You've seen what real persecution looks like and what happens to Christians that claim the name of Christ. In America, okay, you know, a baker doesn't want to make, you know, a cake for gays. Right. They get persecuted. Okay, fine. But some real hard persecution where if I walk outside, name the name of Christ, or if I just identify as a Christian, hold a Bible, and I could lose my life. America doesn't really know what that means yet.
No, and I'll say this, I think it's coming.
And I don't say that arrogantly.
No.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying I think we're kind of pampered here in America.
I get it. It's true. It's when a nation becomes wealthy, there's danger because you get soft and, you don't keep your focus on the Lord. Persecution, my wife and kids, there was one summer in Iraq, 2017, we had to hide from ISIS because they were targeting the work because of what we've done. And I've been shot at, mortared, and you know what? It does purify you. It makes you really go, man, what do I believe? Is this worth it? Mm-hmm. And I've been warning the American church for years. Persecution is coming. And with all the political aspects of what Turning Point stands for, and we're fighting for freedom, this is the one thing I'd say. The persecution is going to come first in the name of hate speech, and they're going to go after the Bible.
Yep.
Watch, folks. Watch what happens. because we can see it. They just passed that weird bill about marriage. It is going to take the freedoms away from the Christian. That's why I can't understand pastors not standing up against it.
And they named it the Respect Marriage Bill.
Please.
What a blasphemy.
Please.
What a blasphemy.
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Respect Marriage Bill. They don't even call it like gay marriage. They just respect marriage.
Yeah.
Just totally like putting up the middle finger to God.
And I got a friend who's gay. He's like, we were getting married before this. This is worse. This is a completely different deal. And again, there's power in the preaching. We got to pray for the younger generation who steps in that pulpit. Because I man, those old guys who are tired and haven't stood up, they need to go onto the back pasture and retire. And let some of these young guys who feel called to stand for what's right and be willing to fight for it, and let them step in and have a shot at it now.
I also think that if those wineskins don't want to get out of the way, and not everyone that's old that's in the ministry is a wineskin. I want to be respectful here on my show.
I represent that. I'm older.
What I'm saying is the old wineskins, according to Christ's definition, people that don't want to let go of their damn traditions over the gospel and passing the baton to the next generation to carry this thing on, those are the people that I think are going to get in the way, are going to cause the church to fall, and not allow it to grow. Because Christ said to do what, Victor? Go out into all the world and make what?
Disciples.
Churches? Disciples. That is what makes the church, not the building, not an organization, the disciples, the Spirit of Christ in people. Victor, thank you for joining me, brother.
I'm
glad to be in this fight with you, man.
Yeah.
Where can people follow you?
Go to victormarks.com. That's Marks with an X. And or anywhere on social media. We're there. We're hammering it day and night. And I'm glad to lock arms with brothers like you to get it done.
Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a spiritual war. Ephesians chapter 6. Go home, read it. My name is Drew Hernandez. These are the front lines. I'll see you guys on the next one.
We must play offense. Game on.
You expect the rest of the world to live in La La Land. We're not.
We've been saying these things from day one.
Our solemn vow to you, be good, be brief, be gone.
You might find yourself changing your opinion on things you've never even thought twice about. That really sets America apart.
You are not ready for season 2. This is Reloaded.
My life tale and my truth has been to fight socialism.
Are you familiar with structural racism?
Yeah, it's a myth.